What's up, everybody? Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down some footage from the man, the myth, the legend, none other than TenZ, rank 1 in North America. And TenZ is someone who's notoriously known for hitting insane shots and hitting a ton of flick shots. So we're going to be breaking down some of the things that TenZ does and what goes across his mind in order to hit these insane shots every single game. But go to the Game Loop website right now, and the link's down below for in-depth advanced VODs, tips and tricks, map guides, agent courses. We got it on the Game Loop website. So do yourself a favor, go check it out in the links down below. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. So kicking it off with this first engagement, we can break it down and we can see exactly what goes across his TenZ's mind to make it possible for him to hit these crazy flick shots that a lot of us could only dream of hitting in our games. So he's actually gonna peek courtyard and he's gonna see nothing. So he's slowly gonna sweep to the left. However, when the enemy Killjoy peeks, he snaps right back and puts pressure pretty much right where the Killjoy is and forces her to retreat, which is something that a lot of players want to be able to do. They want to be able to hit these flick shots or easily flick to the enemy. And TenZ's secret is really not that big of a secret. It's he's always ready to flick to any power angle in his field of view. A lot of times when players look at an angle for a while, they just assume that no one's gonna peek, and then when they move away from that angle and they get peeked, they're just not ready and they die and they're like, oh, what the heck? What is that timing? Well, TenZ acknowledges that the actual moment that an enemy could peek an angle is completely random sometimes. Now, what TenZ has done over and over and over again is tons and tons of aim drills. He's constantly practiced his flicking in a lot of aim labs related duels, or just playing things like free throw or up against bots in the game of Valorant itself. Now, because he can statically execute a lot of these flicks, and in his mind, he's always prepared for an enemy peeking a power angle that's in his line of sight, he's never caught off guard by an enemy peeking a power angle, and he's always ready to flick. Now, that being said, hitting flicks are actually not that hard. You do them all the time, but most of the flicks that you are going to be hitting are shorter range flicks. You see, flicks across your entire screen are going to be much more difficult for you to consistently hit, and flicks that are really small areas or you're only flicking like a couple of feet, those are going to be far more consistent and easier to hit. So the takeaway for you is don't be in the LOS of an uncleared power angle if your crosshair is too far to hit that flick shot. You see, a lot of times you can't just isolate the angle you're peeking, and you have to peek multiple potential power angles, but you never want to be peeking multiple power angles that are so far apart that you have to hit an across the screen flick to challenge it if the enemy is peeking the other angle. And this is something that TenZ tries to live by most of the time. It's really good gunplay fundamentals, and it's something, especially those of us who aren't mechanically as cracked as TenZ, which is just about everyone. If TenZ is doing it, we should be doing it as well. Now, TenZ is going to pressure off the Killjoy, and then he's going to swing across and challenge back ramps, as that peek is a powerful one with cover. That's another natural power angle. And as an important rule of thumb, the enemy Sova was holding this and he saw firing with him and the Killjoy, and so he used that opportunity to actually peek so that he could challenge TenZ when TenZ wasn't aware of him. But in the back of TenZ's mind, TenZ already knows that this is a really common power angle spot that enemies hold, so he was ready to swing it with intent. And the moment that he got the Killjoy to zone off, he instantly swung this angle with intent, counter-strafed, and punished the Sova, who assumed that he got a free peek, but TenZ was ready for him. Now, next up, TenZ is gonna dash past the left choke, but still stay in the smoke so he doesn't peek courtyard, as well as not peeking the left side in smoke. Then finally, he's gonna wrap around and he's gonna kill that Omen in smoke, and he's successfully taking control of the B site. Now, one big takeaway for you as far as TenZ using his abilities on Jett, he often uses dash in a way that many people don't. He uses it often to gain position for gunplay and deny a peek from certain power angles rather than use dash to simply retreat. Oftentimes when his team want to commit to the B site, he'll actually dash from B main to the left side so that he doesn't challenge courtyard, because that could be a really hard angle to contest when you're trying to route onto point, and he can take point control really easily that way. This is something that I would highly suggest you abusing, because there are many situations where you can gain ground on the enemy, whether you're dashing up A ramps when you're playing split, or you're dashing aggressively across into U-Haul when you're playing bind A. There are so many different scenarios where you can use dash instead, not dashing on top of enemies and shotgunning them, and not dashing away after you take a shot, but dashing to gain actual positional ground and to deny enemies peeking from other angles and just isolate the person that you're dueling and take true 1v1s. Now, next next up, we're going to talk about a scenario where Tens is in a 3v5, but he does have knives. And I'm sure you've been in this scenario before where it's only 3 players up against 5, and you're like, is this even possible to win? Well, in order to clutch this, Tens is going to have to go huge here, so let's see exactly what he does. So the enemy Raze is actually going to miss an op shot on Tens as he pushes Tree Room, but Tens will not let that go unpunished. He's going to dash into deny setup and punish that Raze who's actively trying to use an ability to prevent Tens from rushing in, but Tens just kills him with ease and moves on. Now, from Raze's point of view, she honestly should have whipped out her pistol while the door closed and challenged Tens with her potential one tap, or at the very least trade damage on him, because the way she played it, as long as Tens actually actively punishes her, which he did, there's no way she gets out alive, and it was a really free kill for Tens. Now, next up, the enemy Omen is basically gonna miss every shot in the entire world, and he's just gonna jump peek him over and over again and kill him with the classic right click. If you don't want to be that Omen, smash the like and subscribe, come on now. But then he's gonna hold a default with an op up against an enemy Killjoy, and it's actually a 2v1 now, and he's gonna make the call to his other teammate saying, hey, if the enemy Killjoy drops the turret, can you shoot it? Now, that enemy Killjoy obviously doesn't have a Game Elite Premium sub because he doesn't actually peek that angle with the turret, which is probably what he should have done. He should have waited for that ability and peeked it using the turret. But even if the enemy played correctly, Tens already had a counter plan, because if the enemy puts his turret down, his off-angling teammate would have killed the turret, and then it would have forced the Killjoy to swing himself, and Tens would have gotten a free op shot, rather than having to use the op to kill the turret, and then the enemy getting to push onto point, not having to challenge a direct op. This is because Tens actively thinks about what is the correct play, and he does things to play around that correct play, which is something that you should be doing in your games. Hold enemies to a certain standard in your games so that you always have the counter play if they go for a proactive play that you yourself might go for if you were playing their character. Now, if you want to know how to have consistent operator value on attack, then look no further than what Tens does pretty much every single time. So Tens is often going to jump operator peek this angle nearly every single time they're positioned B, and most of the time he will pre-fire as well. Now, this basically punishes any challengers here, and I'm sure in your games you've been in many scenarios where enemies challenge here using an ability, or they just hold the angle with a gun, and sometimes you lose a lot of people here, and Tens gets a lot of picks just doing this over and over again, even up against high-level players. Now, that being said though, the takeaway for you is when you are jump peeking this with an operator, you gotta make sure that you jump early enough so that you only peek the angle as you land, not while you're in the air. Far too often people will jump peek where they jump a little bit too soon and they're actually in the air out of the angle, and it makes it really easy for enemies to punish you. So you want to make sure that you're jumping it barely to where you're actually just barely peeking that angle as you land, so you see the enemy very little and the enemy has very little time to punish you back. Now, speaking of op plays, I really want to show how Tens plays mid here with an operator, because I really like a lot of the fundamentals he brings to the table. He will be holding these power angles that enemies are likely to swing from for quite some time before he changes positions, giving the enemy time to actually demand information and make a mistake because they really want information. You see, a lot of the times, especially in ranked play, if you're patient enough, enemies will make a mistake because they don't know if someone's creeping up mid, for instance, so they kind of panic and they will peek an angle or jiggle peek an angle, and Tens is usually just gonna wait in these angles for a little while, looking for these or fishing for these opportunities. Now, after he holds angles for a certain amount of time, he's actually gonna use this top beam and updraft, and he's gonna hold an unexpected angle against the enemy Raze, and he gets an easy kill. But he only does this after his team pushes up Cat and takes some of these angles, so he doesn't have to play around other angles that the enemy could have. Now, similar to the Vandal scenario that we talked about before, he will often try to position himself where he's not peeking multiple power angles, but he's always thinking about challenging or flicking an angle that he doesn't know an enemy is cleared from. If an angle is not cleared, he's still ready to challenge and flick, and you need to be ready to peek or flick to any angle in your actual line of sight. And typically, as a rule of thumb, if you can make it to where if you're double zoomed in, you have the other angle in your field of view, because if you're double zoomed in and there's an angle that an enemy could be in because you didn't clear it, but you can't see it because you're double zoomed in, there's just no way for you to be able to challenge that, and you're just gonna die for free. Now moving on, we're going to break down a pistol 1v2, and we're going to showcase some of the actual really solid fundamentals and quick thinking that TenZ has that allows him to set himself apart from basically everyone in the game, honestly. So as he approaches point, he's actually going to challenge this left of door frame power angle, and he's going to get some quick shots on the enemy Sova, who launches the dart. Now some players would turn and shoot this, but to not only save ammo but time, TenZ is going to quickly turn around Cloudburst and push it straight in. Now the enemy might be initially confused because TenZ is pushing in this area despite the fact that the recon arrow actually detected no one and didn't get destroyed, but they would quickly understand that he covered it. But even a moment of confusion can really be the difference here, and especially if you're further away from enemies, being able to cloud smoke a recon arrow and have the enemy assume that there's no one in the LOS of the recon arrow is a very, very powerful tactic. Now after TenZ pushes in aggressively, he's going to use his unpredictable aggressive nature here to hold this left side, and he's going to use consistent crosshair placement plus disciplined shots to win the attrition damage battle and actually successfully win this 2v1. Now for this last play, we're going to be breaking down how TenZ nearly aced the enemy team all by himself, and let's really showcase some of the things he did right here to get so far and kill 4 of the enemy members, and what really went wrong to prevent him from actually getting the full ace. So he's going to hold mid as he gets smoked out, and he's not going to push through a smoke or anything like that. That makes it so he's peeking way too many angles, so he's just going to maintain his passive play and just stay here until the smoke dissipates. Now as the smoke dissipates, he's going to wait for an enemy to walk up Cat, which he peeks at angle and an Omen's walking there, and he gets a really easy one tap, 1 kill down. Now his ally mid is going to get killed by the Killjoy, and he's going to quickly refrag with wall bangs, punishing this Killjoy as she starts to back off, and he makes sure to keep his crosshair head level even when he's shooting her through the wall, and he gets that kill. Now afterwards, he's going to step out again, reset his counter strafe, and kill the Raze. Now an important note that you need to understand, if he took too much damage here or loses control of his weapon, he always has dash to reset his aim, but because he converts so quickly, he didn't need it. So while this was a little bit more risky because the enemy knows where he is, he does get a second chance to peek this angle, so he doesn't have to just back off and remain passive. Now with 3 kills down, he's actually in a 2v2, and he gets the call that the enemy could be Cat, so he's gonna smoke B shields, and he's gonna updraft on frame, challenging the Cat angle. This is an unsuspecting angle where the enemy might not instantly know, and an enemy could push right away because he just killed so many people mid. If any enemy was Cat, they're probably gonna take this angle or take this peek. Now, he is going to smoke Cat to cross through mid, but as he actually dashes across, he does bait out a fire from top Cat so he knows an enemy is there. Now, it's actually the Sova, and the Sova is going to use his arrow, but once again, TenZ is ready with the counter using his Cloudburst to stop the recon from gathering information without actually having to use ammo or shoot it or potentially miss it. Now, unfortunately, his Omen that is holding the back of mid gets flanked by the Reyna, so now TenZ is in a situation where the Sova is in front of him on top Cat with the high ground, and the Reyna is somewhere behind him, and he's in a very, very difficult situation. That being said, however, he does know the location of both enemies, and hearing the Reyna actually use her fade, he does know that she's not right up on him, so she's not going to swing him immediately. Now, that being said, however, the Reyna goes in, he hears her running, and he hears her flash. But the thing is, he doesn't actually challenge that Reyna. He actually looks top Cat and challenging the Sova. And some people would be like, what the heck, what are you doing? Well, that's because if he challenges the Reyna, he's going to be blind, and he's just going to get killed from the Sova. So his idea is punish the Sova that's going to be pushing in at the same time as the Reyna, and then turn and try to convert on this Reyna as the flash fades, maybe because the Reyna is going to bait a little bit and not actually full commit. Now, he does kill the Sova, but when he tries to turn on the Reyna and spray fire her, he unfortunately doesn't connect with the shots he needs to win, and he barely loses this, and he does 1v4, but he doesn't ace. Now, that being said, in my personal opinion, it would actually have been quite easy for him to ace if he had his abilities still, but he used so much every single time he was taking these duels, which is not a bad play by any means, but that really happens a lot, and that's why it becomes so much difficult, or so much more difficult to ace as the game goes on, because think about how many angles he's isolated and how effectively he uses Cloudburst to deny LOS and also counter the Sova's arrows, and the fact that he had no abilities there meant that he couldn't smoke off one angle while challenging the other, and he had to take a really risky gamble that didn't pay off, but that is much further than pretty much anyone would have gone, and it's still extremely impressive that he got to that point. But go to the Game Leap website right now if you want more in-depth advanced VODs just like this one, or much more, especially in-depth hero courses made by our top 100 Radiant player Tan, banner and just tons on the website. Do yourself a favor and go check it out in the links down below. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. Definitely let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. That's all I got for you today. I love your faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.